Have you guys ever seen any of those oddly satisfying compilations on YouTube that are just so intriguing and satisfying and cool to watch? Well, Lapis X Labyrinth is kind of the video game equivalent of that. Everything about this game, from the visual art style, to the special effects, to the controls, everything just feels so smooth and nice and responsive. I just like it as an addicting feeling. This is a game that I had a really good time exploring and playing around with. I just feel like there's so much untapped potential in this that I'm a little conflicted about what my opinion is in this game. To give you the TLDR for Lapis X Labyrinth on Nintendo Switch, is that it's average. It's a good game, but there's so much in here that could have made the game better that they just don't explore at all, which is a fairly underwhelming thing to come across. If you want me to recommend you a particular console to play this game on, I would definitely say Nintendo Switch. It runs very well, both docked and in tablet mode, and because the levels in this game are so short and bite-sized, I think this is the perfect game for you to have on Switch when you're taking it on the go, and you just want to pick it up, maybe kill some time, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, and then put it down, and then you're not really going to feel like you're getting interrupted when you're playing. And even though what I did in the game was fun, I don't think it's worthy of very, very long play sessions because you do a lot of the same stuff, but it starts to get old after a while. My biggest recommendation would be to look for some gameplay footage, some long, uninterrupted game footage, like a good long hour out there on the internet, and if you like what you see, then yeah, I would recommend that you get it on Switch. But there we go, TLDR, the game is kind of alright. Not fantastic, but it's not bad at all, so, you know, go look for some game footage out there. If you like what you see, then you might enjoy this just fine. Especially for shorter, more bite-sized sessions on the go through the Switch. If you want to hear me talk in more detail about this game, then stick around for the long version of the review, which goes like this. So yeah, it is basically oddly satisfying the game. I really like the way that this game controls, both with the Joy-Cons and with the Pro Controller. I used both equally throughout my whole play sessions, and I had a pretty good time with the game, all things considered, even though there were so many different bits and pieces from this game that I thought, man, that would be cool to see more of, but we never see again. But let's take it all one step at a time and talk about what I did like and what I didn't like. I have a whole list of bullet points that I will expand on right now. First bullet point, the art style is really awesome. It reminds me of Vanillaware, in fact. When you go through the compendium to look at all of the monster designs, the character designs, the backgrounds, all of the small little things, the buildings, the world that you're in, it looks great. It really looks like something that I would like to explore in some sort of bigger game. It really reminds me a lot of Vanillaware in terms of Odin Sphere, or a Grim Grimoire, or, you know, even stuff like Dragon's Crown, but a lot more cute and chibi and playful. I really like their use of color. Like, this is a very, very colorful game with a very memorable art style. I would love it if they actually used this kind of art for other games. I feel like this is something that they should really keep and nurture and make better, especially when it comes to the monster designs. A lot of them look really, really awesome. Next point, the controls are very responsive and satisfying for exploring. Yes, the main gist of the game is that you go through all of these different levels that are these big maps that you have to explore. And you have to find treasure, get money so that you can keep upgrading your weapons, upgrading your characters, and eventually beating these chunks of levels and one final boss at the end of every, you know, floor in this big labyrinth. So that you can keep making more structures and buildings that will then give you more upgrades. It's all about getting as much loot and treasure as possible in this 2D, almost platformer-ish exploration kind of game. You can have a party of up to 4 people. You have one main character that you control, and everybody else stacks on top of your head. If you've seen the World of Final Fantasy and how those little monsters stack on top of their heads too, it's kind of similar to that. So technically you have one character, but at the same time you have 4. So your level, your health, your attack, all of that accumulates based on the party members that you have. It's not like when you attack and it's like, oh, you know, this one character is level 5, but the other one is 30. No. They combine all 4 and it's like, okay, the grand total is level 45, and then all of the stats add up to just one singular powerful power of, you know, stacked people. But that doesn't mean you only have access to one character. For party members, you can press just one button and immediately switch to another character, and they all have their own move sets, their own special abilities that you can use, and they're all really fun. I like the variety of characters here. You have like a typical warrior, one big armor guy, like a succubus kind of thing. There's another one that's just a maid, a gunner. All of these are really fun. I like the mage just uses, you know, magical attacks. They'll have their advantages and disadvantages. My personal favorite is the warrior. Is kind of like the default fighter character, but she's a powerhouse. I was able to tear everything apart with that one character. And the maid is also my favorite one because she has a lot of really quirky attacks that are all, you know, cleaning and cooking based. She has like hearts coming out of her whenever she attacks. All of them are very fun in their own way. And of course, their art, the way that they're designed, it's awesome. There's a really good reason for you to play as pretty much all of them. And the fact that you can choose 4 of them for a party, and you can combine them and stack all of them and have all of their stats add up is always really cool to experiment and see a bunch of different combinations. And their jumping is also stacked. So if you have 4 people in your party, one character has a double jump, but then you can jump a 3rd time, a 4th time, and a 5th time. So you're gonna be in these levels where there's a lot of really high, difficult to reach places. So you can jump up and go super duper up and, you know, discover all of these different nooks and crannies and areas that otherwise you would not be able to reach. That is also a really good motivator to keeping your party members alive, because they can die individually. And so it's important to keep them alive so that you don't lose any of your jumps, you don't lose any of your stats, and you can stay as strong as possible for when you're fighting big bosses towards the end of a dungeon. A lot of the points that I have here, I already mentioned in the TLDR version of the review. Really great for short pick up and play sessions, I already said that. The monster designs are awesome, yes, already said that. I might have even showed, you know, some of it on screen. The game works great on both tablet and docked mode, yes, I can give you that. It all runs at 60 FPS, really smooth. Now, because this game features a ton of enemies piling up on you in one level, there will be a few moments where the frame rate drops a little bit, but that's inevitable because there are these massive explosions of color and attacks and enemies and, you know, 4 characters at once doing a whole bunch of crazy stuff, so inevitably there will be a little bit of slowdown, but it's only for a tiny smidge of a second, and then it picks up fairly quickly. Alright, so one last point that I have here is that fever time is the best part of the game. When I was talking about oddly satisfying the game, I was definitely talking in large part about fever time. After defeating a certain amount of enemies, there's a meter that looks like a little circle that fills up, and you activate fever time. And so that's when you're able to hit blocks and enemies and a whole bunch of stuff. You can just mow everything down in your way. You're invincible when this happens. Nobody can damage you, nobody can kill you. So you can just take advantage and go off. And you have this enormous and very satisfying explosion of colors. Like, if a rainbow could have an orgasm, this is probably what it will look like. It just fills the entirety of the screen, and it is so satisfying to do, and honestly, I'm still doing it now, and it has not gotten old for me at all. One big reason for why I might be able to come out of these dungeons alive is mostly because of the fear mode and how you're invincible whenever that happens. And if you're really good at fighting and you maintain a good pace of mowing down enemy after enemy after enemy, you'll be able to reactivate it fairly quickly immediately after it runs out. So you can just keep chaining fever time after fever time after fever time, and you can just essentially go through it without really getting hit all that much. Or, if you're in a really tight spot and you're about to lose and you defeat enough enemies, you can get that saving grace fever time that will allow you to give you invincibility, that will allow you to kind of turn the tables in a very exciting way. But there you go, that's pretty much what the whole game is. There's about 7 or 8 different worlds that you can explore, and they all basically revolve around the same thing. You get slapped into this maze-like dungeon level, and there's a bunch of different crystals that you have to get, like little resources that you have to build up in a meter before you can actually leave and exit the level. There's around maybe 2 or 3 different little sub-levels per dungeon, and so it's usually 1 or 2 exploratory levels, and then there's the last one, which is a boss battle. and that's kind of the same formula that the entire game goes by. But of course, every time it is far more difficult, and you have to keep grinding or upgrading your stuff or enchanting your weapons or what have you. The more worlds you beat and you go through, the more, you know, structures and people start cropping up in your little main hub for you to buy stuff, buy resources, buy upgrades, buy all the stuff that you need. And eventually, you know, you start to scale up to that difficulty and you can keep progressing. It's fairly fun. But then this brings me to the criticisms that I have with the game, which unfortunately there are a lot. The first point that I have here is that the world building is fairly mediocre. When you first start the game, they give you some prologue, they give you some setup for the world that you're about to delve into. Obviously, there's some dialogue, a very small amount of voice acting here and there of the characters that you interact with, you know, your party that is supposed to go inside this labyrinth that will apparently, you know, has a lot of treasure and stuff, and if you have treasure, that is good business for the little village that you're at, and that brings more people in, more big business. There's this kind of story of, like, you know, wanting to bring more people into this town that's fairly empty now. And whenever you go deep inside of this labyrinth, all of these little dungeons that you explore, there's like a jungle, there's like a factory place, there's like an old cemetery, a lost world that was unearthed, you know, that existed thousands of years ago. There's all of these small, tiny hints of a story where it's like, oh, wow, this is very interesting, right? As a matter of fact, every single time that you beat a whole world worth of levels, and when you beat the big boss of that world, you always get this newspaper headline thing of like, oh, you know, this band of adventurers, you know, they did this really big special thing, and nothing really ever comes from it, you know? There's a few NPCs there in the town, but they're the same ones, and they never really say anything of worth. You never really see the big effect that this has on the bigger world, much less on the little village that you're at, you know? They talk about how bad things are, but everything seems fairly nice. Nothing ever changes other than a few buildings plopped on top of what was already there. Yeah, there's barely any world building here, and considering how great the art style is, how awesome the monsters are, and how they imply that there's a lot of special stuff here, it just sucks that they just kind of give you that prologue, the little tease, and then absolutely nothing at all. Technically, the only characters that exist is just the mayor of the town, the mayor's assistant, and then all of the other NPCs that upgrade your stuff, and literally no one else. It would have been fun to at least have the bosses of each world have some sort of dialogue or meet some characters within the dungeon, some sort of side quest or whatever, something extra on top of, you know, just getting loot and getting the crystals for you to be able to leave the level. I feel like there's so much that could have been layered on top of the usual loop that can make things more interesting and more fun, but all of that is pretty much non-existent. So yeah, my next point is a lot of interesting things about the setting that are never explored. Yeah, this is especially so for a lot of the levels that you actually explore. Every single world has a different theme to it, and some of them mix and match with each other. And it essentially boils down to just a different color for the background, you know? I mean, there's some levels that are like factories that have like machinery and conveyor belts and stuff. There's obviously like a cemetery level that has zombies and insta-kill kind of stuff. Obviously, you have status effects like paralysis, poison, and all this themed kind of stuff that you come across. But, I don't know, they really don't do a whole lot with it other than, you know, that kind of battle-centric stuff on the surface. Again, no new characters to talk to, just different kinds of monsters. And overall, a lot of the platforms and the traps and the stuff that you do during the exploration is kind of the same thing throughout all of them, which is why it kind of pains me to be a little reductive and say that, oh, it's just a change in background color, but sometimes it really does feel like they changed the background from green to blue, and then from blue to purple, and from purple to orange, and from orange to white, you know? It's just... I really don't feel the difference in this world. I really don't feel like I'm moving to a different layer of this labyrinth at all. It's just another level for me. I feel like I've seen Mario levels that have more distinguishing features than this. The next point is unique looking characters that have nothing to do. Yeah, I mean, I've already covered this. There are a lot of characters, a lot of little NPCs in your little village hub area that look really cool, and a lot of them are original, but they're just there to be NPCs, and they really don't say anything special, or they don't really add to anything to the lore. They have very generic things to say, And the ones that look even more special are just NPCs that upgrade your stuff, but they don't really talk to you about anything else. They're just there to upgrade weapons and upgrade your characters and literally nothing else. Not even the mayor or the mayor's assistant. I like that the mayor is also the lunch lady. I think that's kind of cute, but again, nothing really comes out of any of this, which is a shame. I feel like the stage has been set to create a vast world of lore and story and stuff, and they did like less than C-grade stuff, you know, just barely passing the exam, just the bare minimum for this game. Another point is that most of the game is the same thing over and over again with almost no changes at all. Yes, I already got to that. I already talked about it. It's the same gameplay loop of just going into the level, finding lore, getting the crystals to be able to activate the exit, get out, boss fight, done. There's literally nothing else that you do on top of that. There's no side quest, there's no extra secret thing that you can find. Nope, just beat up enemies, and if it's too hard, grind in a previous level, go back in there again, beat them all up, done, rinse and repeat. That is literally the whole thing. There is some fun in trying to, take advantage of your platforming and the tight controls with like the different jumps and stuff to maybe find a hidden treasure chest, but that's kind of it. That's about as exciting as, this whole thing is gonna get. The next point is that the music is fairly forgettable and repetitive, and then in parentheses I added, especially during fever mode. As I said, you're going to be defeating enemies left and right all the time, and so that lends itself for you to activate fever mode fairly quickly and fairly early on in the game. And when you activate fever mode, it is exactly the same song every single time. It never changes, and it can get fairly grating. It has reached the point that whenever I play this game, I really don't play it with sound on anymore. The music, I can barely remember. I can barely hum the melody to any of the songs. It's very whatever, it's just generic. It's generic sounding music. There's nothing appealing or memorable about it at all. I mean, the fever mode music was memorable, maybe like the 50 millionth time that I heard it. But now, after a certain point, I just got really sick of it. So I did what anybody else would do and just load up a podcast or listen to some YouTube videos in the background while I was playing the game, because I was just so done with the sound. The music was kind of grating on me. I got really bored of it and I don't want to hear it anymore. Speaking of repetition, I have my next bullet point that says there are a few levels that repeat themselves for no reason. That is exactly right. Sometimes within just one world, or even, across multiple worlds, I started to notice that the structure of the levels that I would go into would be exactly the same as other future levels that I would see. This is especially so for the structure within the boss battles, because a lot of the boss battles are just the same kind of, big open area. But when it comes to the exploration levels, I noticed, because, a lot of these levels were really difficult, so I would die a whole bunch of times and have to retry them, so I would have to memorize the layout of all of these levels so that I knew where all of the crystals were, so that I wouldn't waste any time, and just dodge a lot of the enemies along the way. And so I noticed that, one level had exactly the same structure, the same secrets, even the same layout of where the crystals were. It was all the same. So it was fairly disappointing, because there's so many levels, and I feel like they could have done so much more to kind of vary the game up, that to see literal copy-pasted levels from one to the other, that's just, no, that's unacceptable. That's why there were some levels that I just passed through in a snap. I just beat them really fast because I had already played that level before, and I already know where all the crystals were at, so I just went to where I needed to go. I just went through the motions, and I was on autopilot, just kind of going through the levels and beating it, and that was it, that was very disheartening for me. It really pains me to say it, but it makes all of my previous points even stronger, how everything feels kind of samey, and there are some parts of the game that are literally the exact same thing given to you, again, just copy-pasted levels, If it didn't really feel repetitive already, it'll definitely feel repetitive now. My next point says, the game is fairly easy. It is. So you don't feel a need to upgrade characters or weapons at all. Yeah, that's the thing. Something that I really found myself doing a lot was just advancing through all of these levels. And when you're about to select a level, they tell you, warning, the monsters in this are level 75, and then in this one, they're level 78, they're level 80, 85, and they go beyond level 100, There's like 115, 120, like these are some pretty big, powerful enemies. but my overall guild level, or, you know, the level that I had and my stats, you know, didn't really change all that much. I was, in comparison to the monsters that were like 120 or whatever, my guild level was like 40. I really wasn't up to the same level as the other monsters, and yet I could go into a dungeon and just mow them all down like they were nothing. I mean, sure, I was more susceptible to taking hits, right? I would die a little faster, but at the same time, you know, my attack power, you know, kind of scaled pretty nicely. I was still, if I was careful enough, if I was good with dodging, and of course, if you have fever mode, you're invincible. You literally cannot take damage. So I took advantage of that, and I just defeated all the enemies like it was nothing, you know? All you gotta do is just be a little bit more careful, and, you know, other than that, you're fine. And so because the game was so easy, it never really felt like an achievement or a point of celebration whenever I would unlock a new building and be like, oh, look, here's like an arms dealer, and he will upgrade your weapons and enchant them with brand new abilities. And I'm like, you go in there and it's like, oh, your damage percentage goes from 1% to 2%. Yay! Like, and that costs money, and that costs a bunch of resources. And I'm like, am I really gonna go out of my way to, you know, upgrade just one weapon for like 1% or 2% more attack, when I can just get a ton of loot just playing through the game regularly, and then I can find one weapon that is way more powerful just in itself? Like, why upgrade this one weapon when I can just throw it away and re-equip something that's far more powerful? That never really made a whole lot of sense to me. I had to force myself to go into all of these different facilities to upgrade just to say that I used them for this review, because honestly, I never found a reason for why I should ever go and upgrade my stuff. The only place that I thought it was worth it was for a girl that trades, you know, an exchanger, a trader kind of person, where you give money and resources and they give you grimoires. And so these are kind of like these permanent upgrades that they give you that have different ranks. It's like, okay, you can buy this book that upgrades your attack a little bit, and then here's this other one that's more expensive that upgrades it considerably, and then upgrades it significantly. They never tell you specifically how much attack or how much health it gives you. It just says considerably, significantly, extremely high. You know, it's kind of on vague terms, but I definitely felt more powerful after buying them. They were super duper expensive, but it was definitely worth it. Don't waste your time upgrading weapons or going to the trainer in the dojo or whatever. Just buy these grimoires, buy upgrades to, you know, your equipment limit, because there is a limit to how much equipment you can have. They all have different points and weight stuff. So, yeah, just upgrade all of that instead. It'll definitely be far more worth it. You already build up a whole bunch of money just doing the levels anyway. So, yeah, the money is well better placed on that. The next point that I have is that there's barely any customization to the characters, very little colors and voices. When you begin the game, they force you to make at least 2 characters, and it's cool knowing that you can change their hairstyle and their voices, but there's barely any options for them that I don't even know why they even bother having it. I mean, they look pretty cool just as they are. I wonder, maybe at some point there's DLC planned for that or something. I honestly don't know. The options are barely there to the point that it makes you wonder why I even bother with it. Which leads me to my next point. You can have a party of 4, but you are able to create more characters that you can switch out of your party at any given time. And so the point that I have here is that it's cumbersome and unintuitive to switch to different characters. It's better just to stay with the same party for the whole game. I agree with this wholeheartedly, because whenever I tried to switch from one character to the other, they would automatically unequip everything that you had on your character, and you have to re-equip them with weapons and accessories and everything all over again, which is a pain in the ass, because in the dungeons you get so much loot that you have an enormous list of stuff to get through. And so you have to go through the whole list to find that one item that you want. And yeah, I mean, you can favorite your different items, but as you go through the dungeons, you'll find something that's stronger. So you're just going through this long list of stuff, having to go through a long list of accessories. You know, some of these don't really show you the stat effects that it'll give you. So you have to, like, go and remember what the name of it was. Like, it's a pain in the butt. I don't see why. I mean, I can understand why you would unequip the weapon for the characters, because every single character has a special weapon. But I don't understand why the accessories and the snacks and stuff have to be taken away. You're just creating more busy work for me. It's a complete pain in the ass, and I hate it. Also, when you have so many characters to switch out from, why couldn't I have setups or like different decks? You know, I wish I could be able to save a certain combination of characters onto like a profile or something. And then it was like, okay, you know, these enemies are like ghosts, and I can break out my other character setup that is very powerful against ghosts, you know, and then I can just switch it out whenever I want and then use it instead of having to take all of them out individually and then have to add them all individually, and then, oh, all of their equipment got taken away, so you gotta re-equip every single one individually, and then I forgot which weapon I wanted for this guy. You gotta go through the list. It is a complete waste of time. I hate it. It is a pain in the ass to the nth degree. You just have to organize all of your characters one by one. And after a certain point, I just said screw it, and I just decided on 4 party members, and I never changed to any other character ever again. And the final point that I have here is that I would have liked to have some sort of say in rebuilding the main hub, because they really make it out to be like, hey, these adventurers almost single-handedly, you know, brought more popularity to this little village, and you have a house of your own and stuff, but none of that really matters. They kind of just plop down buildings wherever they want. It would have been cool to have some sort of customization aspect to really make this hub your own, you know? Decide where to put the buildings or what color. They keep saying that you have a house of your own, you have your own place to stay, but you're always on the outside, you can never go inside, you know? So again, I'm kind of going back to that same point of like, the stage is set for something awesome, but they never do anything with it. So after me mentioning all of these points about Lapis X Labyrinth, what do I think about the game overall? After playing as much as I possibly could of it, and honestly, if you've played the first hour, you've played pretty much the whole game, because literally the entire rest of the way is just that, but just increasingly more and more difficult every time. You're not really missing much with the other 90%. After playing the first hour, you're already gonna know if you're gonna like this or not. And so I think that this is a fairly average, okay, kind of middle-of-the-road game. It doesn't do anything particularly impactful or awesome. I mean, the controls are really tight. It's fun to move around. And obviously, all of the visual effects and the colorful explosions and stuff are always a joy to see. But again, when the game is all that it is, it's just that. When that is all that you have, it does start to get old fairly quickly. And then when they tease you with all these story things and all of this lore about all of the different worlds that you uncover, you kind of wish, hey, I would have loved to actually see more of that. And you never see it. So it is fairly underwhelming and disappointing in that aspect. And for very, very long sessions, it gets really boring, especially with that music that even now, while recording this review, I can't for my life hum the melody to any of the songs. I can, you know, sing you the Fever Mode song, which I never want to hear ever again. I'm so sick of hearing it for the millionth time. I say that if you're interested in getting into this game, buy it on Switch and play it in small bite-sized sessions on the go whenever you have some time to waste. And of course, if the sound ever starts to get to you, or if you really want to play this in very, very long sessions or stream it or something, I recommend you loading up a long podcast or some music in the background or something to entertain you while you kind of lose yourself in the color of it all. I feel like this game has so much potential to give for so much more. I feel like this is exactly the kind of game that will very much be worthy of some sort of sequel or like an RPG where you can really give us a lot of dialogue and a lot of lore and a lot of expanding as to what, you know, this entire world is about, because I feel like we're only seeing a tiny fraction of it, and they don't let us see us, you know, they don't let us see anymore, which is fairly disappointing. What I played of it, I had a lot of fun with it, but overall, I have a tough time recommending it to you unless you really, you know, give it some time to look at some gameplay footage, you know, read other reviews, and see what they all have to say about it. It's fairly middle of the road. If really nice visuals and just fun, actiony, bite-sized gameplay is enough for you, then sure, you can get it on Switch. I think it's fine. I can definitely say that after being done with the whole game, I really don't have any desires to play it again. I enjoyed my time with it, but honestly, there's nothing here being like, oh, you know, I gotta try this with another combination of characters or something. No, I had my time. I'm good. I'm good. Now, before I go, I want to give a special thanks to NIS America. They're the ones that provided me with an early review copy of this game to make this review possible. Thank you very much for your support.
はい、何でしょうか。受注 完了です。
おう。